Today we're going to be discussing how the San Antonio Spurs went from being one of the worst teams in the NBA to becoming one of the best teams in the NBA contending for an NBA championship. Let's get into it. And I thought the best place to start was when Tim Duncan retired in 2016 because this was a crucial point in San Antonio Spurs history. Because Tim Duncan, let's be honest man, he's one of the greatest players of all time. In my opinion, the greatest power forward of all time. And he is a pillar of San Antonio. He is the guy who was in the heart of everything good they were doing, and he was the reason why they were one of the most successful franchises for so many years. He was a 5-time NBA champion, 2-time MVP, 3 times Finals MVP, 15 times All-Star, 15 times All-NBA selections, 12-time All-Defensive, and 1998 Rookie of the Year. And this really could have been a turning point for the San Antonio Spurs because you take away the greatest player in your franchise history, a lot of the times the team falls off a cliff. However, San Antonio Spurs is not like any other franchise. They're a different organization. Their mantra is about winning. And the next season after Tim Duncan retired, the Spurs still were rolling better than ever. They were a 60-plus win team in the regular season, sitting number 2 in the West. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets and headed to the Western Conference Finals. And Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Tony Parker were the big three, and they led the way. And Kawhi Leonard, he was hooping. And this was very surprising to a lot of NBA fans because Kawhi Leonard, he came as a rough prospect. His game wasn't refined. But all of a sudden, he's become one of the greatest two-way players in the game and an MVP candidate. The jump from Kawhi Leonard was insane to see in real time. Everything was going well for San Antonio. However, a tragic incident happened in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals against the Golden State Warriors. First of all, Kawhi was on fire in Game 1, making shot after shot. However, a player on the Warriors by the name of Zaza Pachulia, he got in Kawhi's landing space as Kawhi shot his shot and injures Kawhi's ankle. And from this point, Kawhi did not return to the series and the Spurs got swept. And this was the beginning of the end for the Kawhi Leonard era at San Antonio. The San Antonio Spurs were so successful last season. They were one of the greatest regular season teams of all time. They were hooping in the playoffs and it was ended by a tragic incident in the Western Conference Finals. However, there was a lot of positive momentum to carry forward to the next season. However, this was not the case. The following 2017-18 season for the San Antonio Spurs was very murky and very weird. And it all started off from Kawhi Leonard having a quadricep injury that sidelined him for the majority of the season. And this injury, it created a lot of tension between Kawhi Leonard's team and the San Antonio Spurs organization because the Spurs thought that he was just sitting out for no reason and he was faking this injury. And this sat with Kawhi Leonard the wrong way because they weren't treating him like a superstar. They weren't protecting him, right? And all of a sudden, frictions were brewing and the tensions were getting higher. And eventually, Kawhi Leonard requested a trade. And this is exactly what happened. DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl and a 2019 first-round pick was traded to the San Antonio Spurs in exchange for Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green to the Toronto Raptors at the end of the season. And this trade was heartbreaking for the San Antonio Spurs organization because the Toronto Raptors won the NBA championship the following season and Kawhi Leonard had one of the greatest postseason runs in NBA history. And he had one of the greatest moments in NBA history. That game winner against the Philadelphia 76ers will be etched in NBA history forever. And for the San Antonio Spurs between 2018 to 2021, they were sitting in a limbo of mediocrity. They were around the 7th to 11th seed in the Western Conference for those 3 years. The furthest they went to the playoffs was in the first round where they lost to Denver in 2019 and they failed to make the playoffs in 2020 and 2021. So it's safe to say that trade really pushed them back and DeMar DeRozan, he didn't really have the impact the San Antonio Spurs were hoping for. And eventually, the San Antonio Spurs, they blew it all up. LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan, they went to new teams in 2021. And now the Spurs, they were moving in a new direction. They were looking to develop some of their younger players and also get some draft capital and try and get high picks. And the following 21-22 season was very optimistic for San Antonio. I'm not going to lie and say they were a very good team. They were very mediocre. They weren't that great in the regular season. However, DeJounte Murray took a massive leap this season, averaging 28-9 and became an all-star for the first time in his career. And this was potentially a piece that San Antonio could really build upon. Derek White was improving, but he eventually gets traded to Boston later on in the season. But their new draftees, I look at Devin Vassell, I look at Keldon Johnson, both of them significantly improved. And now the San Antonio Spurs, they really had a young core that they could develop and build upon. And as I mentioned previously, this Spurs team, they still weren't very good because they were still young and very inexperienced. And they got a very high value pick in the draft. They got the number 9 pick, and Jeremy Sochan got drafted by the San Antonio Spurs. And he was described as a player who had the potential to have elite defensive versatility due to his size and high motor. So the San Antonio Spurs, they added another young promising talent to their squad. It seemed like that the San Antonio Spurs were trending in a positive direction. However, shocking news struck the NBA because the Atlanta Hawks traded forward Gallinari and 3 first-round picks to the San Antonio Spurs for all-star guard DeJounte Murray. And this was shocking to the NBA because DeJounte Murray had such a promising and elite season. Why would the San Antonio Spurs trade him? And the answer was clear. The San Antonio Spurs, they went full tank mode and had one of the worst records in the 2022-23 season. But there was a very good reason why the San Antonio Spurs went full tank mode in the 2022-23 season. Because in the 2023 draft, an alien, a generational player, a once-in-a-lifetime player was committing to the NBA draft. And the San Antonio Spurs, they had to put their names in the hat for this player because he was a player that was about to redefine basketball, and his name was Victor Wembanyama. 26 years ago in 1997, when all the key players for the San Antonio Spurs, including David Robinson, went down, the San Antonio Spurs, they tanked and they got the number 1 pick. And guess who they drafted? Mr. Tim Duncan. And 26 years later, history repeated itself. The San Antonio Spurs, they intentionally tanked and they got the first pick of the 2023 draft. And guess who they drafted? None other than Victor Wembanyama. And this kid was about to change the NBA. He was described as a 7'4" demigod who moves like a guard and has the skill set of a guard while having the potential to be the greatest defender of all time. The San Antonio Spurs had lucked out. And Victor Wembanyama, he did not disappoint and he surpassed all expectations in his rookie season. He averaged 21.4 points, 10.6 rebounds and 3.9 assists. And most impressively, he averaged 3.6 blocks per game. That is ridiculous. We've never seen anything like that in our lifetime. And yeah, man, the San Antonio Spurs, they really landed the next cornerstone of their franchise. Despite Victor Wembanyama having a generational rookie season, the Spurs still weren't a very good team and they were still in tank mode in the 2023-24 season. And because of this, once again, you guessed right, the San Antonio Spurs got a high-end draft pick. They got the number 4 pick of the 2024 draft and they selected a very good player by the name of Stephon Castle, who was a big guard, regarded as a defensive menace and can get downhill at ease. So this is another young talent added to the core of young talent that the San Antonio Spurs already had. The next season for the San Antonio Spurs, the 2024-25 season, it was another slow season for the Spurs, which is very understandable. Victor Wembanyama, he's still in the second year of his career. He's still trying to figure it out. Their new draftee, Stephon Castle, it's his first year. It's still a very, very young team. They need more reps. They need more experience. But one smart acquisition that really helped develop their team was Chris Paul. Because one thing about Chris Paul, he improves every team he goes to. He brings winning to every team. He brings IQ and he also helps develop the young players of the team. And for a guy like Stephon Castle, who's a point guard, being under the tutelage of Chris Paul was massive for his development. And that veteran presence really helped mature that team. And we're going to see this later on the video. And looking at the talent that the San Antonio Spurs had, you look at Stephon Castle, Victor Wembanyama, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell. They have a lot of young talent on this team. The San Antonio Spurs realized that they need to take advantage of this window of opportunity. And that's exactly what they did. and they traded for De'Aaron Fox in 2025. It was a 3-team trade. It was a very complicated trade. And the crazy thing about this trade is that San Antonio didn't even need to give up any of their key young pieces, which was crazy for a player of the caliber of De'Aaron Fox. But this really sent a message to the rest of the league. The San Antonio Spurs wanted to win now. However, tragedy hit the San Antonio Spurs in the 2024-25 season because Victor Wembanyama had suffered a blood clot in his right shoulder on the 20th of February 2025, and this sidelined him for the rest of the season. De'Aaron Fox also ended his season early because he underwent a season-ending surgery to repair a torn tendon in his left pinky, and all of a sudden, the two superstars for the San Antonio Spurs were out for the 2024-25 season. And the common theme for the 24-25 season for the San Antonio Spurs was tragedy because Greg Popovich, he also retired from coaching because he suffered a stroke in 2024, and later on in 2025 he retired and his assistant Mitch Johnson took over coaching duties from this point on. And thankfully Greg Popovich was in stable condition afterwards and he is healthy. And I just want to take this moment to sing the praises of Greg Popovich. This guy has been an NBA coach for 25 plus years, and he was responsible for the San Antonio Spurs building and creating a dynasty and becoming the most winning organization of all time. We need to give this man his flowers. He's one of the greatest, if not the greatest NBA coach of all time. And from what I hear on podcasts and players, him as a person, they describe him as a great person, as a wonderful character to be around. And a lot of the times, the guys at the top, they're not the nicest people, but Greg Popovich, he was the nicest individual ever from what I hear. So huge respect to Greg Popovich, one of the greatest to ever do it. But the 24-25 season, it struck the Spurs a lot, man. You look at Victor Wembanyama, he suffered the blood clot. De'Aaron Fox, season-ending surgery. Greg Popovich had to retire as a coach because of health conditions. It was a rough season, but thankfully, all three of them came out of a better side. They all came back healthy. And yeah, man, that's the most important thing. But yeah, the 24-25 season was rough for the San Antonio Spurs. And for some reason, the San Antonio Spurs accidentally tanked in the 2024-25 season. This is a very common theme for the San Antonio Spurs for the last couple of years, but they are one of the smartest organizations we've ever seen, and there was a good reason why they tanked near the end of the season. And I think everybody knows the reason why the San Antonio Spurs tanked, and it is because of the draft. And draft luck hits the San Antonio Spurs once again. Surprise, surprise. This organization genuinely is one of the most luckiest organizations I've seen in my life. Because god damn, how many high value picks are you going to get? In the 2025 draft, the San Antonio Spurs landed number 2 pick and drafted Dylan Harper. He was described as a big guard who can get downhill, finishes well, and play makes really well. His player comp is Cade Cunningham, so what a pick this is for the San Antonio Spurs. And to be fair to San Antonio, they have been extremely lucky, but you also have to draft well. And San Antonio's talent ID is one of the greatest ever, and that's why they're one of the most winning organizations of all time. And now we're at the present. Where are the San Antonio Spurs now in the 2025-26 season? Well, the San Antonio Spurs have been an absolute revelation this season. They're sitting at a 23-8 record. They're second in the Western Conference. They made it to the NBA Cup final. However, they did lose to the Knicks. They have a 3-0 record against the defending NBA champions, the OKC Thunder. De'Aaron Fox, Wembanyama, Castle and Harper, they're all balling at a very high level. And the old players, they're not old, they're still like 24, 25, 26. But the older players, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, the guys that were drafted previously, they're still hooping at a very high level. Vassell is one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. Keldon Johnson, he's playing at a very high level right now, one of the best rebounders in the NBA. And their young talent, they're also surrounded with great role players, glue guys and veterans. I look at Barnes, Cornette and Champagny. They're contributing very well to this team. So this team is rolling and they are a true contender for the NBA title this season. Now that brings us to the end of the video. The San Antonio Spurs have finally completed their rebuild. And this organization, man, it's one of the smartest organizations ever. The way they draft, the way their decision making goes, Everything is top tier, and there's a reason why they're in this position right now. One of the most winning organizations of all time, and they're ready to roll, and they're a problem in the NBA. So OKC Thunder, Denver Nuggets, all these contending teams, watch out, because the young, hungry, defensive San Antonio Spurs are coming for y'all. What do you guys think? Thank you guys for watching the video. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and peace.